Hey, welcome Homestead friends, how are you? Today we're going to talk about goat performance testing. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please make sure to do so. Ring that notification bell to get notification of future content. Let's talk about it. So ever since LaLa and I got into, started talking about even starting a goat herd, a meat goat herd, you know, we started asking the question, well, how do we do that? What do we do? How do we get into this? We tried to absorb as much information as we possibly could about what is a high quality animal, how do you manage a goat herd? So we tried to absorb as much information that we could from as many sources as we could. We read entire books, spent a ton of time online researching from extension offices, scientific studies on goats, trying to learn about breeds, etc., etc., etc. We reached out to different breeders and talked to them about why they raise certain types of goats. Ultimately, we ended up deciding on the Kiko breed, essentially because we heard that it was hardy, parasite resistant. You know, kind of the running joke with when we would talk to Kiko people about boar herds, boar goat herds, they would say, you know, we're going to go out one morning and we're just going to find our entire boar goat herd dead, you know, and you know, boar goat breeders would say, you know, they pay way too much money for those Kiko goats, you know, and they don't look nearly as good as the boar goats do. You know, so depending on which side of the fence you were standing is kind of the perspective that you had on which meat goat is better. We ultimately decided on the Kiko goat because of its hardiness, because of its parasite resistance, and relative easier management style is what we understood that to be. So the very first step that we took after we read about this, after we determined which goat we were interested in breeding, we then attended an educational / breeder sale that was put on, I believe, by the National Kiko Registry at a sale up in Carrollton, Georgia. 3 years ago, I believe it was, 3 years ago. We hoped to be able to meet breeders that were raising Kiko meat goats. We hoped to attend the educational conferences and begin learning how we might manage a meat goat herd. So we went to this conference with no intention whatsoever of buying a goat, just to determine whether or not we were getting in over our head. So we absorbed as much information as we could to try to make sure that we're making the right decision for our small farm. What we found when we went to that sale were a group of people, Kiko breeders, that unconditionally threw their arms open for us, showed us around, showed us how to evaluate goats, what they look for when they're looking to purchase a goat at a sale. Just a very, very warm, welcoming feeling by most of the goat breeders there. So LaLa and I felt very comfortable attending this sale. When we opened up the sale catalog to start looking at the goats, we immediately began seeing terms like grand champion, first place, average daily gain, low fecal egg count, in various buck tests and performance tests that were held around the country. Some of them dating back several years, some of them more recent. We didn't know what any of that meant. When we went in and we began sitting in on the lectures to learn about goats, the very first session had to do with performance testing. You know, being a researcher myself, it kind of intrigued me about why, you know, what does that have to do with what we're doing, and what do they mean by performance testing? What data are they collecting? So I asked the simple question, what does buck or performance testing mean? The answer was very simple. It's where data is collected on an animal and then compared against the performance of other animals so that you can determine which are the low performers and which are the high performers. So that was a pretty novel concept to me, because that's what I do in my professional work, is I do vocational rehabilitation work with people. So I'm constantly testing individuals and then comparing their results to other people. So now, having attended just this first session, I realized, well, now I'm going to be able to do this now with goats. So it was a really kind of fascinating, eye-opening thing to me. On the other hand, LaLa kind of had a deer in the headlight looks. She is not a data person. She is much more of a black and white person. So the way that we divide our work here on the farm is I do the data tasks, and she does the day-to-day caring, the health checks, all of the paperwork stuff. That's all LaLa stuff. She takes care of them medically. She maintains the health on them. She does all the doctoring, if you will, and I don't do any of that. I do the data stuff. So one of the references that was cited in this initial training was a kid breeding record from the Oklahoma State University. So I pulled that up on my cell phone and was looking through it, and I'm like, well, all right, well, if this is the way the industry works, this is I'm going to really have fun with this. So when we got back from that SNAIL and educational conference, we began contacting breeders and asking the question about data, performance data on their animals. And what we really learned was that while at these conferences are talking about performance testing, and performance tests do happen in the industry, several are held each year, not all breeders participate. Not all breeders believe in performance testing. Some do on-farm testing. Some send them multiple states away and have them tested by an independent third party, such as a university. We knew immediately that we wanted to do performance testing, data collection, and data analysis on our goat herd, so that we make sure that we're making decisions based on data, not on emotion, and not the appearance of that goat, what we think that goat should do, but on the data, actually what that data and how that goat performs related to the data. Not just quantitative data, meaning numbers, but qualitative data, meaning what's the health of that goat? How much work do we have to put into that goat? Is that goat constantly wormy and we're having to do a lot of health maintenance on that goat? Those are qualitative factors that will feed into our quantitative decision or numerical decision making. We're going to talk about that in a second. So when we started reaching out to breeders, what we realized is that many breeders, when I started talking about data, immediately started talking about the pedigree of their animals, the pedigree of their goats, both on the sire side and the dam side. And you know, that was the support for why I should buy that goat. And being a numbers guy, that just didn't float well with me, because frankly, I didn't know anything about the pedigree. I knew very little. You know, I put a post out on one of the Facebook groups asking about which are the ideal pedigrees. Some of the responses were helpful, some were just hateful. It really didn't help me a lot. I learned more from the folks that I saw up in the Carrollton sale that I talked about earlier, that kind of got us moving down the path of what to look for genetic wise. You know, and again, a lot of research online, on Google, looking at farms and looking at some of the actual buck performance data from various farms. All of that was very helpful in determining which pedigree lines we wanted to begin to look at. But what I realized is very few farms had actual backup data to actually support the performance, other than those that were in these performance tests at universities. So that's the purpose of this video, is to kind of go through very briefly kind of the software that we use to monitor not only the qualitative aspects of our goat breeding program, meaning the medical, all of that stuff, the medical history, all of the soft data, as well as the numerical data, birth weights, average daily gains, birthing percentages, male versus female. And that's really, we have developed a program on farm to kind of do just that. So with that said, we have modeled our data, our analysis platform, on the Oklahoma State University kitting record. That's where we started at. But as I'm going to discuss later when we're going through the actual software, that didn't really meet everything that I wanted to measure. Even being a newbie, I realized that I want to look at more than what this record allows me to do. So we built our own Excel spreadsheet, and we use that to manage our goat culling and retention decisions. So what we go over in this video is simply how we do it. This is what we measure, what we look at. That doesn't mean it's going to be right for your farm. You have to make your individual decisions on your own farm about what will work and what you don't believe will work. Maybe this will work for you, maybe it won't, but it should stimulate you to begin thinking about the kinds of data that you might consider looking at to be able to make better management decisions for which goats you're going to keep and which goats you're going to cull out of your herd for low performance. There's absolutely no substitute for you experiencing, you having the experience to put behind whatever data you want to collect. The key is doing that regularly and consistently so that you have comparable data from year to year to year. So the data that I'm going to go over with you in the spreadsheet is what we're doing right now, this year. That doesn't mean that's what we're going to be doing in 2 to 3 years. Something that I always told interns when I supervise them in my work is that the most dangerous part about an intern, somebody with no experience, have all the education but no experience, is that they don't know what they don't know. We've kind of come into the goat breeding industry not knowing what we don't know, but we have learned over the past 2 to 3 years what works for us on our little slice of heaven in Northeast Florida, that might not work for someone in Oklahoma or North.
If you guys haven't fallen asleep, I applaud you. Dad has about 15 more seconds left in his extremely long intro, so make sure you guys grab some sweet tea, a comfortable chair, and listen to the rest of this extremely informative but not so entertaining video.
Georgia or Tennessee, West Virginia, or any other part of the country. It works for us here. Maybe it'll work for you with some adaptation, maybe it won't. But I want to emphasize that what we do here may not work for everybody. This is just for illustrative purposes. So I hope you enjoy it. So when LaLa and I decided that we were going to get into the goat farming business, we realized very early that what we wanted to drive our decision-making process was data. Data on each individual animal. We wanted to keep the best of the best and cull those that did not meet the standards statistically or qualitatively that we wanted for our herd. So we spoke to a few breeders, and a few of those breeders did tell us, yeah, we keep data on our animals. And the thing that kept coming up time and time again, particularly with kidding records, so that we could evaluate dam performance as well as kidding performance, was a software, what was called a software, from Oklahoma State University. So I'm going to bring that down here. So that's what this is. This is the goat kidding record version 2016 from Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service. This is a very sophisticated Excel spreadsheet, or uses an Excel interface that is programmed but locked down, so you can't really make any changes to it. So what you have here is what you have. So you have an instructions tab, and you have a kidding record here. Tag number for the kid, any notes you want to put in, gender of the kid, date of birth, and it just goes across. Now these gray areas are the calculations. So this is the data columns, this is the calculations. Here's a dam column, and here's a dam page so you can keep track of the performance of the dams, and here's a page so you can keep track of the performance of the sires. So I would consider myself kind of an intermediate user of Excel. This is, like I said, this Oklahoma State University program is built around an Excel interface. So I'd consider myself kind of an intermediate Excel user. So with that, what that means is that I know enough to make me dangerous. I'm certainly not an expert computer programmer by any stretch, but I do know probably more than average about computer programming, computer algorithms or programming algorithms, and in particular kind of the formulas and how to program Excel to do what you want it to do. So this, when I looked at this did not really keep what I wanted. The scope of data that I wanted to keep could not be contained in this spreadsheet. I wanted to be able to run calculations off of my own data, and I couldn't do that within this interface. So what I ended up doing was building my own spreadsheet, my own data record, and that's what this form here is. So this is an Excel spreadsheet as well. This is multiple tabs, kids born. These are the birth stats for the kids. This is the single goat history. So every goat that is retained, we had two of our kidding does culled this year, had them processed because they did not meet the standards that we were looking for in terms of baby weight, and they were the two lowest performing out of the entire herd. So both of those were culled, as well as 13 kids were culled. We maintained or retained 8 who were then sold for to other breeders, and then 2 of those were retained on farm, 1 buckling and 1 doeling. And we're going to go through one of those doelings in the course of this example today of how we keep our data. So this is single goat history, and then we go to the next tab, and this is kind of our I just did this program last year. This is the pairings that we plan on making each year to each animal. This column here just says, you know, what we can't, you know, we don't want to breed this animal. For example, this one, Pride's Fancy, this is Heat Seeker's mother. So we don't want to breed Heat Seeker to this doe, that's his mom. Nor do we want to breed him to this. This is his full sister. We maintain both a brother and sister, a doeling and a buckling, from the same litter on farm. So that's what this is. So that's what I'm going to kind of go through and show you how this works, and a little bit about, kind of give you some insight into our process for how we make retention or culling decisions. So that OSU document, that was a handy framework, granted you that, I'll grant you that, but it really did not include the scope of data that we wanted and the flexibility that I wanted. So we really have 2 different programs that we use on our farm. So let's pick one. So let's pick the famous Rose. Or I say famous because if you've Rose, we've got a whole video just on Rose, my favorite goat, and I say that with a chuckle in my voice. So here's Rose. So this is all of the data that we keep on Rose. So Rose is a 100% New Zealand Kiko. She was born January 5th of 2017. All of her demographic data is in here. All of her NKR registration or registration information is all in here. We don't generally put in the pedigree information. This is her progeny, B8, B9, and LaLa's Rosemary. So these 2 were retained and sold, or one of them was culled. This one was sold. These 2 were culled as little bucklings. Complete health record. As you can see, we got her 7/20 of 19, and you know what her FOMACHA has been. Really a consistent 1 to 2. Really kind of a low maintenance goat. We've been very, very happy with Rose. But this doesn't tell us anything, or doesn't tell us a whole lot, even in the breeding section. This doesn't tell us that we have what we want in terms of the scope of information or data that we're looking for. So that's what we have built this spreadsheet for. So this spreadsheet has multiple tabs. Here's the kids born. So this is the kids tab. And let's go through this first. So we've got the tag number for the animal. This is the tag number for the kid, date of birth, the group. So each year we just promote that by 1. So this last season was our 2020 kidding season. The pink are the doelings, the blues are, or the M's are the bucklings. Litter size was 2, so you can see most of these were doubles except for Rose, which gave us a triplets, so 2 males and 1 female. We had our oldest 2 does gave us 1 each, but they were really good quality animals. The dam's full name, the sire's full name, and then these are automatically calculated fields. So once I put in what the birth date is, then it automatically calculates the 30, 60, and 90-day weights. Once I take those weights, we plug in the numbers, and it automatically calculates our ADG, our average daily gain. For those that don't know what ADG means. So ADG is the average gain of that animal on a daily basis. So really it's a measure of how efficiently they are converting their food to weight, to meat. So for example, P1, this is one of the does, this is the only doe that we retained in our own herd. So her birth weight was 7 pounds, 30-day was 19.3, 60-day was 32, 90-day was 45.5. So she maintained an ADG in the 0.4 pounds per day all the way through weaning, okay? Her brother, Heat Seeker, our junior buck that we maintained to kind of start measuring and testing him, was born at 8.8 and weaned at 90 days at 62.7 pounds. So Fancy, their mother, weaned, 62, calculate really quick, 62 plus 45, so about 107, 108 pounds of kids she weaned. Now that's not bad for a mama that does not weigh, we'll get into that, that doesn't weigh that much. She's not a huge animal, but she's certainly not a gigantic animal either. So we were very, very impressed with her. We're going to get more into the birthing in a bit on another slide. So that's all this is. So these are calculated fields, and because this is not locked down, I can make my own calculations. So for example, this field here, that's the formula. That's the formula for this. That's the formula for this. So this isn't hard. It's not difficult to do. It's just it takes some time to get used to it. If you've got a basic understanding of Excel, then it works. So for the most part, this is the main data entry form. There's a few others where we put data into, but most of the data that's used on all of the other forms, particularly on these two right here, all comes from this. So we fill in the kids born, and then we come up to farm stats. So when we look at this one, we maintain, I'm just going to give you a bottom 2 example and an upper 2 example. Now what I mean by that is, so we retained on farm, we did not even offer for sale, P1 and B1. Okay, so this is Anita, and this is her brother, Heat Seeker, okay, B1. This pair, P11 and B12, these were both culls. So average weight 6.3, 6.6 for the male, for the buckling. They weaned at 90-day 25 pounds, and this buckling passed. He didn't even make it to 90 days because of anemia. Now, backstory. So this is where you've got to consider, you can't just look at the numbers. You've got to also look at the qualitative data, and that's why keeping data such as this is important, Because if you don't have a good health history, then you're not going to be able to maintain good records in terms of what you've done to each individual animal. So this dam, JFF Jetta, we have had trouble with her.
Guys, Little Rick here. If you haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Ring that little notification bell for notifications on future content. I'd also like to congratulate you, because if you've made it this far, you have now dedicated 24 minutes and 59 seconds of your life today to the LaLa Farm YouTube channel. So right now you're about halfway through the video. I advise you to go refill your sweet tea, maybe puff up your comfy chair, and settle in for the second half of this, again, super informative video, but not so entertaining.
Since the day we brought her onto the farm with parasites, she is, you know, she might get as high as a 3, but most of the time she's a 4 or a 5. Huge parasite problems with her, and this was her time. So we put her through one kidding season after we got her, and made the decision, quite easy decision, that she was on the call block for the breeding mothers. We also called one other breeding doe as well, but we'll use Jetta as our example. So these are Jetta's kids. So one of them didn't even make it to weaning. The other weaned the little doeling at 25 pounds. So once this is filled in with all of your data, then the way this is programmed is that then if you go to the second tab here, it begins to auto-populate these fields. So this is our 2020, so our birth average for the entire kidding group. So this was 23 animals. This was 23 animals. Average birth size, now this includes bucks and does, was 7 pounds. Standard deviation was 1.41 pounds. So what you should be asking yourself now is, what is a standard deviation? So a standard deviation is a measure of central tendency. So it is, in fancy words, it basically tells you how much variation there is in a group of subjects, in a group of numbers, how much variation there is. So in a normal distribution, in a normal statistical distribution, 68.3% of all numbers in a normal distribution, if they follow the bell curve, then they will generally resemble a normal bell curve if the sample is large enough. So in our case, what I'm doing is I'm looking for animals, the average range, which I'm defining as one standard deviation from the norm or from the mean. So this line right here in the middle is the mean. One standard deviation to the left is low, one standard deviation to the right is high. So this entire range from the low to the high would be the average range. So animals that are greater than one standard deviation above the mean, this, will be above average. Ones that are down here are below average. So let's take and apply that now. So the standard deviation for our kidding, or for this kid crop, was 1.41 pounds. So the average range is 5.58 on the low end to a high of 8.41. So statistically, that is the average range. So to look at this again, this line right here would be 5.58. This line would be 8.41. This would be 7. That number right there, the average. So then we break it down into male versus female. So we had 12 males, average birth weight was 7.1. We had 11 females, average birth weight 6.88. We also calculated standard deviations for those. So our average male buckling range was 5.6 to 8.6. For the female was 5.3 to 8.3. So there really wasn't a whole lot of variation. And then we do the same exact statistical calculations at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. So the average range, for example, on our bucklings was 33.74 to 50.74. So this line right here, let's look over here at the charts. And this is all calculated. I've got this program to calculate automatically. This line right here, 50 pounds, would represent the high end of the average. So these are just the bucklings. And this is heat seeker right here. This is the one buckling that we kept. Now these are some others. Now all of these bucklings were cold. We did not retain any other bucklings other than heat seeker. Let's look at the doe side. At 90 days, the range was 29.86. Range was 29.86 to a high of 46.82. So somewhere right around in this area. So we had several more doelings that were in that high average range than we did bucklings. So you see all these scatter plots. These are, you see the scatter plot. So these are basically how that animal progressed over the 30, 60, and 90, and 30, the birth weight, 30, 60, 90 days. So the blue represents the birth weight. Orange is the 30-day weight. Gray is the 60-day. Yellow is the 90-day weight. So this kind of gives you an idea about where they start by color. So they're all roughly the same, but you can see how P1, this one right here, this is the one that we ultimately retained. She just really was very steady in how she clustered together. So now if you look at this one right here, this one ended really high. This was P8. Let me see who P8 was. P8. So this was one of the ones that we sold as breeding stock. So this was a very good goat. P8. We did not, so it was really between this one and this one as to which one we kept. So then we go over and we start looking at some of the ADG characteristics. So we're really looking at the difference between this one right here and this one right here. This is P8. So this is the ADG. So the highest ADG was measured of all of the goats by this one right here at 30 days, okay? But you can see how this P1, or this P1 right here, this animal, clustered really tightly together. So all of her ADG measurements were really, really tightly clustered together. Some of these other ones, for example, keep in mind the orange is the 30, the gray is the 60, and the 90 is yellow. So this one started declining in how fast it was gaining weight relatively quickly, where the one that we maintained held that body weight, and she has continued to hold that body weight. Some of the others, you can see the orange is the one on top. If I'm going to see anything, I want to see this yellow on top, or at least overlap with the others. And none of these does really did that. Some of them are tighter clustered together. Some of them continued to decline. Same thing with the bucklings. The ADG was clustered pretty tightly together on many of these. Okay, this one that fell off the chart, this is the one that died. This was B12. This was the wormy kid. So the ones that we recall, we had P11 and B12. So here is B12. This is the one that died. This was how his performance was looking. Birth weight, 30-day weight, 60-day weight. So he was really, really lagging behind his cohort group. And then the female, same thing. So this doe just gave us very small kids, and they just really were underperforming for the rest of the kid crop. And here is the sister to the little buckling that died. Just really poor performance. What I'm looking for minimum was, keep in mind, something above 46, 47 pounds or so. So in this range right here. So I can immediately start looking at which ones are average. So these are the only ones that we even looked at in this area right here. All the rest of these were culled immediately. When you look at some of these, you can see how they were declining in weight. We wanted ones that clustered as tightly together as we could. So then we go over to this third page, and this is the individual goat performance for each one of our animals, all the adult animals. These are the performance characteristics for each one of the does. The litter size that they had, total kid weight, and this is again all calculated from the previous page, from that very first page that we put the data in right here. All of this is calculated from that. Total males, total females, average female weight, average male weight, and then this was the percentage of the doe breeding weight right here, 107 pounds, as compared to what was ultimately weaned at 90 days. This is that percentage. So she weaned 75% of her body weight. When we look at the one that was ultimately culled, I think she's, yeah, this one right here, she weaned 35.71%. So her body weight was 70 pounds. She was a small doe to begin with. Total weaning weight was 25 pounds. Recall, one of the kids died. But even then, it probably would have been very low, even if it wouldn't have died, because they were both very, very small kids. So these are kind of the benchmarks that we're looking at, and we're looking at how effective is that doe in producing kids, and then weaning those kids with high milk fat, feeding those kids to wean them at 90 days. What we're looking for is for them to wean, you know, it's not a hard and fast rule, but wean as close as we can to their own body weight, particularly if it's a double or triple. Now, if it's a single, it's probably unrealistic. But if it's a double or a triple, they should be weaning, you know, pretty close to their body weight. Now, if it's a big doe like we have in our doe LaLa, she's 160 pounds. Well, that's obviously not going to happen even with even if she were to have doubles or triples. But an average size doe, you know, 110, 120, 125 pounds. That's not unrealistic to have that doe wean twins or triplets that exceed her body weight, and that's really what we're looking for, and that's what this measure right here is the percentage of the dam's body weight. So some of the outstanding performers, like this one here, this is a relatively small goat. She bred at 70 pounds and weaned 93.2 pounds of kids. So this is a Pearl is a 75% boar, 25% Kiko. Pride's Fancy, this is Heat Seeker's mother, weaned 106% of her body weight with twins. So doe breeding weight was 102 pounds. She weaned 108 pounds of kids. This one weaned 107 pounds, 106 pounds. These were singles, which is why those are so low. This one this is Rose. Now this is, you know, go in and look at the video of Rose. Rose is an interesting animal. 113% of her body weight. She's the only doe that delivered triplets for us this year. So that's how we're keeping track of our data, and how we're using some of that data, some of those metrics, to ultimately make decisions about which animals stay on our farm and which animals do not stay on our farm. So if that doesn't thoroughly bore you talking about statistics for the last 25 minutes, then all the power to you, because there's really no way that you can talk about statistics and not be, for the average person, bored out of their gourd. I kind of am a numbers guy, so I kind of get ramped up when we start talking about statistics and standard deviations and you know, that's just what I do. You know, everything that I do is field tested, if you will, and our goat herd is absolutely no exception to that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it helpful or useful. If you got any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful. Make sure to ring that notification bell for notification of future content. Until next time, always treat others as you would like to be treated.